Hey y'all, Casey and Brandon here, and we wanted to talk about the comics we've been reading. We've been getting a whole bunch of exciting finds recently. We've been combing the various Las Vegas comic book stores and found a bunch of good stuff. And some stuff just that we had around that we wanted to talk about. So, Brandon, what kind of stuff have you been reading?
Hello, Casey Jones. It's lovely to see you.
Hello.
Let's see. So, if you people, if you lovely human beings watching this, follow our lives on any level, I have glasses now. And one of the impetuses for me getting glasses is one of my favorite cartoonists. I found an old book of his from, I think it's from 1985 or 1982. I read two of them in a row. But Matt Howarth's book called Domes. And it occurred to me when I was trying to read this thing that the text was too small for me to actually make sense of.
Before?
Yeah,
Before you
and
got
so I
glasses?
got glasses, and now I have glasses.
Yay!
Yeah, and so I read Domes. I don't
Mhm.
remember where I got this. I feel like it was in Vegas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I assumed all the Matt Howard stuff was stuff you had already. That's cool. I didn't realize that.
He's so prolific in these things. I don't know how they were distributed, but I imagine a lot of them were mail order. So I'm always still finding them. This one's a like a detective story with his character Savage Henry that he had in all of his Savage Henry and Post Brothers comics, teaming up with Marilyn Monroe, and both this and the other one, basically it was called Rock Horror, I think, Horror Rock or something.
Oh yeah.
That one I haven't finished reading because these things are fine wine that I take my sweet time on. They both start with a hanging murder that has to be investigated. So I was wondering if it was a theme that he did more than once or twice. It says it has some very fun stuff in it. There's like they end up in like a secret Nazi library and find all these weird like fiction books written by Hitler and have to fight the librarian. It's really, really fun, weird stuff. I'm always advocating for old Howard stuff.
Yeah, that's a creator that I didn't know at all until I met you, and I think he's definitely one of my favorites now. He does like the most innovative, interesting, different, weird stuff, and it's unfortunately rather difficult to find his stuff. Fortunately for me, you have tons of it, so I'm lucky. But do you have any tips for finding this stuff?
Yeah, well, he has a website that you can order stuff off of.
There you go. All right.
My favorite book by him is WRAB. It's a pirate television station.
Oh yeah, you've told me.
One. It's one that I always talk about because it has this page in it that you have to hold up to the light to read the subliminals through it. And that one, it might help if you know his other work to understand why that one's so exciting. Because a big aspect of it is that it's done totally seriously with characters that have like the ability to shift between realities and go into all these fantastic worlds, but it shows none of that. It just shows that like it was much more straightforward than that stuff. What have you been reading, Casey Jones?
Oh wait, can I say one more thing
Yeah,
about it? I think a really good entry point for his stuff is like Savage Henry, if people can find it, because it's so bizarre. It's like focuses on, that's the one, wait, am I thinking of the brothers? Or
The Post Brothers.
Post Brothers is the one that is that the one with like the residents and stuff and Cthulhu and all that?
They overlap. So but yeah, Savage Henry's in a
confused.
band with Cthulhu, and there's in one of the early issues of the Savage Henry run, there's all these cool things, like there's a million clones of this one woman Caroline, and everyone has a Caroline, and Savage Henry's girlfriend is one of them, and she is hurt, and they bring her inside of a rock and roll, a city created by musicians inside of Ayers Rock in Australia that's run by the residents. So he'd mix real bands into this stuff.
Yeah. And I didn't even know who the residents were when I was first reading it. I was like, who are these? What's this? This is crazy guys with eyeballs for heads and they're wearing top hats and tuxes. And you're like, oh yeah, those are the residents. And I was like, what? And I looked it up and was like, oh yeah, that's a real band.
Yeah, I've managed to fake my way through so many conversations about people that are into eclectic 80s music because I've just read obscure comic books to talk about.
Well, yeah. So anyways, he's so great. Very fun, very weird, interesting. We should at some point make a whole video just about his stuff.
Yeah, it'd be fun to go through all the different series and all the different books he did.
Yeah. Okay, you asked me, what have I been reading?
We've been reading.
Well, looking at my stacks that are down here on the ground to figure out what I should show next.
You section them off into categories. Right?
Yes, that's true. I did. Thank you. So the categories that I made up were basically warrior nun comics, there's this comic book called Warrior Nun Aurelia created by Ben Dunn through Antarctic Publishing in the 90s. Which is now a Netflix show that we've been watching, and we could also talk about a bunch about that. But anyways, it's a genre that I've really connected with, and because it's not just that one comic. There's actually a whole bunch of comics that have sort of like aped that idea, and it also crosses over into another area of great interest to me, which is Warhammer, and so I've got some essentially warrior nun Warhammer comics. They're called the Sisters of Battle, but they're basically warrior nuns with guns.
Going deep in the murder nun genre.
Yes, going deep in the warrior nun, crusading against the demons genre. So in that vein, I got issues 1, 2, and 3 of this Marvel series of the Sisters of Battle, who are the Warhammer nuns with guns. And that was really it's a really fun series. I think that they capture the grim darkness of the Warhammer setting really well, and have a bunch of like badass warrior nuns.
Well, you were telling me really cool things. I haven't read these ones yet, but you were telling me about really cool things about the Sisters of Battle lore, like the things about when people mess up and are punished in these kind of like mech suits where they're exposed.
Oh yeah. The Sisters of Battle lore is really interesting, because so their whole thing is that they believe that the God Emperor of Warhammer is God, and
he couldn't have that name if he wasn't.
Yeah,
legally speaking.
And so their faith is their armor, is what they say, and so if people. But they still wear, a lot of them still wear like battle armor. But if they show cowardice or commit some other sort of sin, then they can be given various punishments. And one of them is to be stripped of their armor. If any of the battle sisters are stripped of, show cowardice, whatever, they're stripped of their armor and sent into battle without any armor on, basically naked, with only like prayers, like literal scrolls of prayers with like wax seals that are put onto their skin and stuff, and like executioner hoods, and then just giant like two-handed chain swords that are like taller than them pretty much.
Wait, can they see through the hoods?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like there's very little between them and the enemy. They just go in there chopping at them.
They just have to make war sexy.
Yeah.
Not too far.
I certainly appreciate it.
Sisters.
I think, why can't you have both? You're sexy and badass. And then if you're someone else, so if you're like just like a regular human imperial citizen and you commit certain acts of heresy, you have the option to be redeemed by doing what you were talking about, which is I believe they're called the penitent engines, and it's like this giant mech suit, like big old arms with like saw blades on the ends and like guns and stuff. But the pilot of that mech suit is just like strapped to the outside with no armor, no physical armor on the person, because they believe that if you're really penitent enough, then the emperor will protect you, and so the faith in the emperor is the only armor that you need. And so they just send these sinners swinging into battle to give penance.
Crazy people.
to the emperor. Anyways, so yeah, that's Sisters of Battle. I love Sisters of Battle. I collect the models. They're all over there, and the the comic book held up. Sometimes they don't. That one did.
Right, and the show is an interesting mix of
the Warrior Nun show, which is not at all related to Warhammer.
Yeah,
but is another Warrior Nun piece of
that little
stuff.
Because I was going to say, you being really into the Warhammer stuff, and specifically the Sisters of Battle, kind of led you to trying out the Warrior Nun show. And I'd watched an episode or two of it in the past, just because I knew the Ninja High School Antarctic Press stuff. And I think didn't Battle Angel, or I always say Battle, didn't Warrior Nun come from Ninja High School originally?
Yes, Sister Shannon first appeared as just Shannon Masters in Ninja High School issue 37. I like Warrior Nun Aurelia a lot.
And they do an interesting thing where Warrior Nun Aurelia, Sister Shannon, it's basically like starts with her ending, the TV series.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's almost like a sequel to the comic.
Yes, it's almost like a sequel to the comic. The Warrior Nun Aurelia was a person in like the Crusade times, so like the 900s, I think, 900 AD.
She's like medieval Spawn. To bring up a classic that people would know. Hey, rascal.
So she existed, and she was given this halo that allows her to like basically have superpowers, and that halo and like the duty of like protecting the world against demons and stuff is passed down through the ages. And so while Warrior Nun Aurelia isn't like that one person isn't the focus of most of the comics, she is in some of the comics. There are ones that go back and like flashback kind of type deal. Sister Shannon Masters is the Warrior Nun Aurelia in the present day.
In the Ben Dunn stuff.
In the Ben Dunn comic books. And then, like you're saying, in the TV show, the first several minutes are Sister Shannon being killed, and then the halo being passed on to somebody else. And then they actually go on to deal with that for basically the whole rest of... Like, that thread never really goes away. Like, they're frequently... The loss of Sister Shannon, she was much beloved. Like, she's much mourned, much missed. And the new bearer of the halo isn't even a nun, which is like, what? Crazy. So, anyways, the show's good.
I think it's good. It's surprisingly mixed. Where I think initially when I started watching it, I was just like, let's enjoy this trash, and then they did some plot stuff that I was really impressed by, and they kept just. And I think my guess is it's the nature of syndicated television writing is the quality of certain characters and certain episodes really dips sometimes. And so you have a really solid episode will all be just like, this is amazing, everything they do is perfect. And then they'll bring in a character that just says they'll do things that just feel too dumb to be done by the same people that did the other things.
It's frustrating.
I think there's a nun that was complaining about colonialism at one point.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're a nun, like it's like I was equating it to like wearing a conquistador outfit and complaining about colonialism. It's just like, maybe check the mirror.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, because her order was a Coptic order that started off. So like technically they were like one of the original tribes or whatever, but. Yeah, no, it's a bit weird. And especially that character really, I think, gets on our collective nerves because, like, most of the characters in the show are really competent and interesting, and, like, they struggle with things for sure. Like, it wouldn't be interesting if they didn't struggle, but they're competent. She is, like, this one nun that we don't particularly care for is just, like, the biggest... bummer. Like, I don't know, it feels to me like, or I guess it gets to me in the same ways almost as like Wesley Crusher did, as like in like the most dweebiest days of Next Generation, where because like he gets better, but
no,
like,
he gets I agree,
he
gets better and then he gets so much worse,
but during the worst time
during the early
Crusher, it's like that's what Sister Yasmin is like.
Yeah, we're just like, why is this boy on the bridge?
Yes. So they do some things, and they were dealt a bad hand in a way because one of the showrunners, I mean, because one of the actress who played one of the main characters after the end of the first season left the show for essentially undisclosed reasons, and that's rough. Like,
sure.
So they had to write around that, and I couldn't get confirmation, but it seems like maybe Sister Yasmin was like brought in as a consequence of Mary having to go away. Huh. They also bring in another nun without any explanation, who I think her name is Dora, and it's just like, oh, she's here now, and like, what?
Yeah,
that's
super strange. Secret. We're getting into the weeds here.
Yes, we are. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
so interesting show. So yeah, we were watching that and Andor. And Andor has been solid all the way through.
Yes. Yeah. That's actually that's sort of like our test constant. Like Andor continues to be really, really good throughout. So.
But sometimes you want a little. I almost like things that are a little bad to pick at.
Yeah, I mean it's fun to do that with you.
Mm-hmm.
But we found lots more comics. What else did you find?
Yeah, so I let me find the name. So this is I got 2 comics, both by the same guy, both at the same store. His name is Tayar Ozkan. Yeah. I'll say Tayar. Yeah, Tayar Ozkan. Yeah. I believe he's a European artist. I should have actually looked this up, but so there, I got a Paradox Press kind of thick book called La Pacifica, which is about basically a mass shooting at a motel by a veteran, that then the veteran who owns the hotel starts to go and investigate the reason behind the whole thing. And this is book 1 of 3, and it's really well done and very, very kind of Manara European. Mm-hmm. It feels like a little bit of a slow burn. There's some really good scenes in it. There's a scene where he goes to a gas station where behind the gas station the owner and his kids are all firing rifles, and the father's getting really mad at the kid for not hitting the shot, and the guy goes back and just like realizes that he was like, I used to shoot with one of these when I was a kid too. The stocks always get bent, so he bends it back with his knee and the kid can shoot. Yeah. And it's just like this kind of character thing for the main character. While they're kind of investigating this murder mystery. And they go to Las Vegas in it. It's made in 1994. And so there's this very different, because we're in Vegas now, mm-hmm. and it's a very different version of Vegas. Like they're smoking in their hotel room and all the stuff that kind of you don't expect. And it's a little bit more kind of classic 70s Vegas in this than we're used to. So initially I knew this artist stuff. And this one's it's written by Joel Rose and Amos Poe. So it's them working off a script. But initially I knew his work because he did these like sexy caveman comics that were, I think it ran at Heavy Metal. Oh. And this is an Eros collection of a bunch of those. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this was kind of a good find. And it was one of those funny things, like it made me really like question how. So one of the things we've been doing lately is we've been going to a ton of for some reason Las Vegas has a ton of different comic stores, which we'll talk about in some future video, I imagine. Mm-hmm. But the comic store we went to that we got these at, like this La Pacifica book was like, it's a thick graphic novel that was like $5 when it came out, and it was on a stack of things that said 50 cents, and I took it up to the counter. And the guy was like, just take that. And I was thinking, like, this is, like, on a craft level, this is so much better than comics we were buying because they're fun and weird, that they were, like, had marked up from their price. Yeah. So my point is there's no justice in the world.
I feel like we do frequently benefit from the fact that the comics that we like are not the comics that a lot of people like, so we find them for super cheap.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Well, oftentimes it's one of the things that I think that interest us is we'll go to comic stores and want to find things just because they're mm-hmm. obscure and we've never seen them before.
Totally. Very much agree. Because it usually leads it to being interesting. Maybe not always good, but usually at least interesting.
There's different metrics for good, but yes, I agree.
So like I mentioned, that was one of the, when I was mentioning the Warrior Nun stuff, that was like one of a category. So like some other comics that I've been reading that were in that category are The Magdalena by, actually I don't know who it's by, but it is from Top Cow at Image, so 90s, right?
Right, so it's probably an early 2000s, 90s kind of darkness, Witchblade style comic.
Yeah, that kind of thing, except Warrior Nun. She's like a descendant of Mary Magdalene, and every descendant of Mary Magdalene has basically, in this universe, has basically been like the Warrior Nun of this universe. They like protect the world from demons. They wield the Spear of Destiny, which was the spear that pierced Jesus's sides when he was crucified. Yeah. Anyways, it's fun. It's totally just the same thing, except like a slightly different style. And just to show you a different style, like this one right here is a Warrior Nun comic. This is like Warrior Nun Aurelia. It says Warrior Nun Aurelia, yeah, and Kein Toter is the name of the.
They just weren't trying to woo anyone with that
comic. I mean, it's a
readable logo.
It's I know the logo's rough, and it's in German.
Yeah.
Kein Toter is like it's like Baba Yaga from the German-speaking part of the world.
And this is drawn by Yannick Paquette as well.
Oh, right on, yeah. Who I like. He did a really good run on Swamp Thing as well as a bunch of other stuff, but this is some of his early work. This one's from 1997. Those are both good. And then this is, like I was mentioning, that character that got written off or left the show. The Warrior Nun show is Shotgun Mary. This is her comic book. So this is a spin-off of the Warrior Nun Aurelia comic books. And she's not actually a nun, but she fights alongside the nuns and takes out demons and stuff. And this issue was super good. It was Joe White, right? And Herb Millett?
Yeah. And it's interesting. She's basically like, I was equating to her that she's the kind of the archetype of like Dark Horse Comics Barbed Wire, of Pamela Anderson Barbed Wire.
Yeah.
But without the nonsense in that. Like this is a much more like kind of what you think Barbed Wire was, which is just like a girl on a motorcycle who kills things.
Yeah.
In this case, demons. So I want to mention before I forget about the Yannick Paquette on the Warrior Nun book.
No.
In the 90s, I feel like Antarctic Press was such a gate of entry to so many creators. Like it's where I got my start, and I know people like James Kachalka's first work was there. A bunch of there's probably like a dozen cartoonists who you wouldn't expect who all kind of came out of there, and it's frustrating because I feel like in 2022 I don't know if there's an equivalent to that. Maybe the internet, but I don't know if the internet or any of this stuff kind of leads to bigger stuff the way that Antarctic Press did. But kind of on the Shotgun Mary kick, I've been going through a bunch of Joe White comics, the guy who did this one.
Joe White.
And I probably told the story a lot, but he's the first like professional cartoonist that I ever met in person and hung out with when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through he did a series called Twilight X, which was really fun and worth tracking down. And I went through and read all of that. I was starting my days kind of reading Twilight X outside every morning. And then I got his Steam Wars series. So this series, I think it was started by Fred Perry, who did Gold Digger, which is another kind of fun Antarctic Press book. And then Joe White took it over, and initially, it thought it was just like a dumb Star Wars parody comic, but it has some trappings of Star Wars. Like they have lightsabers in it, and there's kind of good and evil sides that kind of mimic that. But I feel like it being connected to Star Wars at all is really kind of false, and it's something completely of its own and really unique. And Joe White, he's interesting because he's never not just taken his time and done the best storytelling he can do. It's really kind of surprising in a lot of the types of, he'll do like a sexy Ghostbusters comic and it'll be beautifully paced out and him just like breaking his back to make the best comic he can do, and it's really impressive. And I feel like he's kind of an unsung hero of the medium.
Yeah, he's really good. I never, like you're saying, I never would have thought that this book called Steam Wars, which is ostensibly a steampunk Star Wars parody comic, would be as awesome as it is. It's really good, really beautifully done, really, like you said, really well paced. Is only vaguely steampunky and only vaguely Star Warsy.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of
really just its
airplane
own
dogfights.
thing. Yeah, but that's not necessarily very steampunky. It's more like diesel punky. But it doesn't matter. It's just a really fun, good series, and you've collected several of them now,
I think I have all of them now.
All of them now. So that's cool.
And there's a trade, surprisingly, though, that we found. We had the frustrating experience of, I think there were 3 issues that were all Joe White, and I found the trade that had all 3 of them when I had 2 of the issues.
Yeah.
And so I had to keep digging, but I found this in a dollar bin this week.
Yeah.
On my birthday, I found a dollar bin.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so then, just continuing on that Antarctic thread, there's one more. This is, I think, we got a bunch of more Warrior Nun stuff somewhere else, but this is the last of the ones in my stack. This is a Warrior Nun and Gold Digger crossover, so that's like as Antarctic as it gets.
And that's much. Like the only Ben Dunn one that you've managed to find, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, who's the original creator of Warrior Nun. But yeah, the Gold Digger is another. That's a Fred Perry series at Antarctic. It's one of the longest running independent books at this point. Like that's currently being published.
Yeah, it might be. It might be the longest done, because I think right now it's basically Spawn, Savage Dragon, and Gold Digger, and as far as I know, Gold Digger has only been drawn by Fred Perry, where Savage Dragon actually interestingly had a couple issues done by other image founders, and then Eric Larson went back and redrew those himself, did his own versions. So, but Gold Digger kept restarted a couple times when it went from black and white to color, so it might have actually be the most by one guy out right now.
So anyways, that was a fun issue to read because both of those properties are interesting to me. And
is it just Cheetah that shows up in it?
Yeah, they talk about her sister and stuff, but I think Cheetah's the only Gold Digger actual character that shows up. I think.
She's a were-cheetah.
She is a were-cheetah, yeah.
Those ones are really fun. At some point we should take the plunge and read every Gold Digger again.
Yeah, they're fun. What do you got?
This is a weird one. This is a comic called Stern Wheeler, and essentially it's one of the creators' names on this. So it's Ralph Canna and Jim Aparo, and I think Jim Aparo went on to do superhero comics. But it is essentially a failed newspaper strip that these guys started running in a paper with the idea that it would eventually get picked up in syndicate, and it just didn't. So they stopped making it, and it's very competent, but fairly generic and kind of nonsensical in fun ways. It starts off with this newspaper. Stern Wheeler is a newspaper man, and his boss wants him to get married and then fake his death so he can capture some kind of criminals. And so he's introduced this woman, and they're supposed to get fake married, and then they go off on a boat trip a week before it's going to happen and get shipwrecked and have to deal with all of that. And I think the original plot line just kind of either gets stalled or just never happens. And there's things in it that just feel like, in 1980s cartoons, there was a feeling sometimes where a character would be on the verge of death and then it would go to a commercial break. And then when it came back, like things had shifted a little bit and they were able to escape more. And it was almost in my head, it gave me this idea that they died in one universe and you're seeing another universe because things had shifted. They do a lot of that in this, where it feels like they were like not really paying attention to what they drew last week, But it's fun, and it's one of those things that just like it was interesting to read. I do qualify sometimes when I get I read a lot of comics in the bathtub, and I've been reading. I think I guess we didn't do a video while I was doing it, but I went through a whole period where I was reading a lot of John Sable comics in the bathtub. Yeah. And they're just like I was just saying I've been reading a lot of Sable comics in the bathtub, and they feel very much like these kind of 1980s Miami Vice adventure comics, and the Stern Wheeler definitely feels like a much earlier version of the same thing.
Right on. Well, speaking of newspaper comics, we picked up this book called AXA, which is reprints of a British comic strip rather, which results in the unfortunate, let's see, can I show these pages? Yes, I can. It results in the unfortunate side effect of it being very small, panels being extremely small, and it just pains me because like I feel like if these were full, like they're beautiful, these panels are beautiful, and if they were full size, it would look amazing.
And the reproduction is unfortunately pretty rough on these. A lot of the lines drop out.
Yes, so that's a bummer, but persevered anyways, continued reading, and I'm thankful for it. It's so super good, just like weird, unique. I cannot believe that this ran in British newspapers. There's a foreword sort of explaining the nature of the comic to American audiences who, like me, would be fascinated that this could be published in just a normal newspaper.
It's a lot of titties.
There is a lot of nudity. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of murder and stuff too. But the sexy stuff is what Americans tend to balk at. I think it's awesome, but it's like crazy to me that some of this ran in a like I said, just a British newspaper.
Drawn by a Spaniard too.
Drawn by a Spaniard.
I think Enrique Romero is the artist name. He's fantastic.
The world it's set in is really interesting. It's our wait, is it our world?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's our world post like a nuclear and like biochemical wasting. So like things are super mixed up. There's these dome cities. There's wild people. There's mutants. There's like all this stuff. And the main character, her name is Axa. She's the eponymous character, and she's from the dome cities. But she's like, I don't want this regimented life. I'm gonna strike out on my own. And she goes on all these adventures. And
it's in the year 2080.
2080. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. Wait, 2000 AD or 2080?
80.
Okay. I asked because in England, 2000 AD is another popular magazine, so I wasn't sure if that was like a...
Oh, that'd be interesting if it was a pun.
Yeah.
Do you have the other post-apocalyptic sexy blonde lady comic? Because I feel like there's a lot of...
Misty?
Misty, yeah.
Yeah.
Because this one, they mentioned at certain points, at one point they go to an island. I just read a little bit of this one. They go to an island where since the war or chemical whatever, there's a bunch of guys in turtlenecks that have just been like holding off people with shotguns on a mansion island for a while, and they let her in, and they're just like, oh, she's from the Dome City, she has no imperfections at all. And I feel like the character Misty in this one, which is this kind of underground comics sexy future barbarian book as well, has like they're almost the same character in a lot of ways.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, it's like this archetype. Well, there are differences. Misty is a little bit more like Axa is tough as nails. Like she can. There's actually a point where it's really interesting. Like she's really tough, and she's with this guy from the Dome Cities who's this like soft boy who's like, oh, I don't know, I'm scared, I'm gonna go home, and so he runs away.
Does he come back ever?
No, I think he finally just leaves.
I thought that was really fun because I know there's a full book before this, but for me, just reading the beginning of it, it was just like they're like, we're from the Dome Cities, and he's like, this is scary, I'm going home.
Yeah, well, he was her, like, they don't really have boyfriends in this weird future, but like person she has sex with.
Post-boyfriend apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's the concept of boyfriend that has been destroyed by the mole people.
It's basically because in the Dome Cities, there's something weird about, like, they're not allowed to create family units, and then in the wild area, they're, like, they just take people as slaves or something like this. I forget exactly. But, yeah, I don't know. It's the setting and, like, the different little, like, settlements are wildly different cultures, so lets the writers explore these fascinating ideas. There's one civilization in there it's a matriarchy that's like underwater. Anyways, super interesting. If you can find a copy of Axa, I recommend checking it out.
This looks like a bikini themed matriarchy to me.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in it is like, or like most people in it are like very scantily clad. And you found that Eclipse Comics reprinted it, and that might be actually better reproductions. So I mean, this version is not Eclipse Comics, but you had sent me pictures of Eclipse covers of AXA. So
yeah, but strangely enough, the forward of this is by Catherine
Zeta-Jones. I don't know.
Catherine Yuande, whose name I'm probably butchering, who was the
Ironwood, maybe.
She was the one of the editors for Eclipse Comics.
Oh.
So maybe it was like a prelude where they were reprinting these and then they did other special editions.
Who is the publisher on this version?
Empress. So it says Empress Newspapers, which I imagine they were, and then this is published by Ken Pierce.
Express Newspapers.
Oh yeah, sorry. So
In
Ken
Park
Pierce.
Forest, Illinois. That's close to where I grew up.
Yeah.
Weird.
It has this ad on the back for all these other. So there's Modesty Blaze and Valkyrie and the Spirit and Lady Luck. Mm-hmm. Only two of them that I'd heard of before: Modesty Blaze and the Spirit.
I'd only heard of the Spirit. Yeah, that was a good one. And then, like you mentioned, this is another one we picked up several issues of. Misty from this publisher called Forbidden Fruit, which we had never heard of them either. But I think now collectively would like to hunt down everything by them because they all look very fun.
You should dig at the afterword that the Forbidden Fruit editor wrote, which is pretty fun.
Oh yes, very silly.
Yeah, this almost feels like the missing link between like Barbarella and Frank Thorne comics.
I could see that. Yeah.
There's like an old wizard in this that feels very Frank Thorne.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because especially the way they have her like sitting on his lap and stuff.
Yeah, and he creepily meets this 19-year-old girl, and he's like, "You're perfect. While you're asleep, I made it so you will no longer age."
Yeah. And this is another one. This one did not run in a newspaper. I know that for sure. But it's
because it opens with her going down on the guy.
Yeah, it's very explicit, and the sexy scenes are very much written in like a romance novel. Like it's like she kissed his length. It's very, very explicit. But yeah, then this is what you were talking about, which is the back, the afterword by the author. He says, too many experts are yakking about what's good for you these days. Wouldn't you like to tell them to shut up? And that is a sentiment that definitely resonates with me. I think both of us.
Well, I mean, something I really liked because it's kind of hokey and
it is. That hokiness also resonates, I think.
But it had this paragraph in here that like really speaks to, because this was a reprint of kind of 70s stuff, reprinted in 1991. And the early 90s in comics were like it was the Bad Girls era. Mm-hmm. So it was very teenage boy, lots of blood and guts, but there was also this kind of like there's a little bit of fear, but not near what the fear in comic stores is these days. Mm. Like something that's interesting for us is we're always digging for adult comics, and we'll go into comic stores and be like, do you have adult comics there? And the amount of people who have just been like, oh, we don't carry those.
Yeah. It's
just like, we're, I'm 100 years old. I can handle whatever Ralph Snart with a boner comic you're selling,
Yeah.
So anyway, the quote I was going to go to, it says, if you're the type who makes your own decisions, then maybe there's still hope for us all, because even now the forces of censorship and darkness are upon us. Some dealers are caving to real or imagined pressure and are becoming afraid to carry Forbidden Fruit comics. And that felt very much just like I feel like if you were publishing this now, you would probably, I mean maybe I'm wrong, because I feel like there is kind of a pushback in recent stuff, and we are finding people doing riskier, funner comics.
It's just barely starting though.
It's starting again, because it is, but I like that sentiment a lot.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
Outlaw comics.
Yeah, that's what can I have it? I want us to own a comic book store called like Outlaw Comics that only, like, we don't have any Marvel or DC, and we only have, unless it's drawn by Steven Sepchik, and we only have like adult material.
You walk in, we hand you a gun when you walk in.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, I went to the oldest comic store in Europe once, Lembeek in the Netherlands. And they gave me a tiny little espresso when I came in. And I thought that was the most European thing imaginable. So I had this tiny little coffee that I was sipping while I was trying to, like, one-handed look through the comics they had. So, yeah. It's like, you ever go to very Portland barber shops? I imagine you have not. They'll give you whiskey. Oh, yeah, all the time. That's where I get my beard trimmed. Oh, yeah, I wondered. Is that me? I'm your beard. No, but that was a very just like... Welcome to Mansfield, population man. Here, have a whiskey. So, our comic store you'll get a 6-shooter revolver. So, you can't do that much damage with only 6 bullets. Yeah. And a little
pop caps preloaded.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the next one you got?
Let's see. Oh, I'll go with this. So, on kind of that theme, I got this Iron Cat manga translation of a Cutie Honey issue by Gona Guy. And it's clearly just kind of like one chapter of an ongoing thing. It's so trashy and fun. It's just it starts off and it's just a bunch of shots of a nude beach, and then the main character who's a cop he's watching the news and they're just like, Eros Island, Japan's first topless beach, and he's like, I gotta get down there. And then Cutie Honey, who he kind of works with sometimes, he's like Commissioner Gordon and Cutie Honey's his Batman, if you will, if I understand it right. She calls him up and she's like, I'm going down to the nude beach right there to check it out. And so he's like, I have to see her naked. I was going to go down there anyway, but I need to see this person I work with in a professional environment to fight crime naked.
Oh my gosh.
And there's a traffic jam, of course, because everyone's trying to get down there to see all the naked girls. And then when he finally shows up there, everyone on the topless beach has been hypnotized and is being led into a Panther-themed submarine. And then there's this thing. She does the thing called Honey Flash in the thing that basically I was talking about on Instagram and I described it as like it's like I was saying it's like the Sailor Moon transformation for perverts, and I was like, well, a different kind of perverts. And so she does her Honey Flash thing and turns into like a topless brunette, and they sneak into the Panther submarine. And then when she finally sneaks in and sits down, the cop character's sitting right next to her, and she's like, you're supposed to have gone help with the police. And he's like, sorry, I just wanted to see you naked. So that's the theme of this. And then at the end of it, there is they're introduced to the villain character, who's like a sexy naked lady named Sister Jill, who has her chest turns into wolf teeth with nipples as the nose, and she bites the guy's head.
They're like the breasts are like what's it called? Like the Stranger Things, like Demogorgon mouths, where it's like 4 bits that sort of open up wide to like eat the person through her breast mouth,
but with teeth.
Yeah, it's like reverse nursing. Yeah.
Reverse nursing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Cutie Honey is like, I mean, kind of what you said, like a Sailor Moon-ish type character. She's like a magical girl type character. Just normally she's not in these kinds of situations, which makes it all the much more entertaining, right?
Is that it's Gona Guy.
Is it always adult stuff?
It's.
I thought it was like, just like.
Well, the movie that we watched at one point is much less that. Yeah. I mean, there's a point that she's running down the street in her underwear, but it's just more like Cheesecake, where the comics, because it's Gona Guy. He's been called kind of like Japan's Robert Crumb a lot. Oh. The story I always like to tell is he, at one point, the Japanese equivalent of the PTA was always really mad because teenagers were reading his comics, so he did a comic that was just about a school that was constantly trying to have like orgies and fighting the PTA.
That's silly.
Yeah, so yeah.
Then show the cover, because the cover is like not at all like the interior art, but it's very fun.
I don't know who this. I mean, it looks like. I think it might be Soriyama, the guy who did all the Sexy Robot. He did like a Aerosmith album cover.
Sure.
I don't say. Anyway, it's a very fun, trashy comic.
Yeah. And then, so like fun, trashy comics is another of the like the categories that I've been getting. So it's like the Misty and the Exa and stuff, and then also this. So one of the current publishers that is actually still making this kind of comic books, these comic books, is Outlaw Comics, is Boundless Publishing, and so both of these books are from Boundless. This one is called Ember, and this one's called Helena.
Noticing a theme in titles.
Ember, Helena.
Like fiery.
Fire. Yeah, because fire is sexy. And so Ember is more lacking in substance, but just like very silly and fun. Like we were talking about it earlier today, and like basically the main character, she's a superhero named Ember, but she's also like a party girl, and she starts fighting this other girl in the comic, and their clothes are just basically off almost immediately for no real reason. Oh my gosh, I forgot how explicit it is inside. Do not.
It is what the people in the street call the pornography.
Yeah, but yeah, they just like start fighting, and then there's like sex scenes and like all the stuff. It's weird.
And this
and
one,
awesome.
I should mention, this one's by Christian Zenier. Whose work I've followed for years, and is a fascinating person because I've never seen somebody kind of lay out their, like, kind of similar to Crumb. I feel like his proclivities of what he's into are in his work very dramatically. He'd be like, man, he sort of spent a long time rendering this girl's dirty toes. So he did some adult comics, something called Banana Games and something called Honey Liquor Sorority that kind of ran in the same Sizzle magazine when I was doing adult comics over at NBN. And it's really beautifully rendered stuff, and and his ways he tells stories I find fascinating. I was explaining to you that when he was doing just other adult comics, they would have things where like a sexy cop would pull over to like girls in schoolgirl outfits, and you'd be like, ooh, I know where this is gonna go, and then they just shoot her and drive off, and he'd be like, I don't think anybody wanted that. How come? And so there's a bit of that feeling in this. Like, it is like naked fighting, but it's also like really brutal. And there's a point, because she has fire powers, there's a point where she just like boils the asphalt and like knocks this giantess woman into it and buries her in like molten asphalt, and then lets it cool to like essentially trap her there. And the lady breaks out, but there's like this moment of being like, oh, what nightmare snuff comic is this? But it's fascinating. Yeah,
it's really fun and unique in that, like, not much, like, even with these other ones that are pretty severely explicit, this one goes to another level in a way. I'm trying, from just that scene that you had open earlier, the detail that they like draw some of this stuff.
Something I thought was really funny in this book is the main character makes a point. Every other female character that's introduced that has a name, she makes the point of telling them how hot they are.
So, anyways, that was interesting. And as far as I'm aware, I don't know if this is if this Ember book is a property outside of Boundless. They definitely have some books that are properties outside of Boundless, and this one is one of them, which is Helena. And I know that because I found some non-Boundless Helena books, which...
Oh, being switched publishers?
No, well, it was just not... It wasn't like this adult explicit thing.
So then Ember's a character in the book Lookers?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like a prelude to another book.
Yeah. Or, no, it's like that's what they meet up. It's a crossover.
Oh,
Boundless does a lot of crossovers. They do crossovers with Lady Death. They do crossovers with... what's one that I got? I think Zenoscope stuff sometimes, because thematically it makes sense.
Okay.
I've gotten some of their Jungle Girl comics that are really fun. They've got, or Jungle Fantasy, I guess is what it's called. Anyways, Helena. So yeah, I found some original Helena issues that long predate this, and basically she was like this girl who got tricked into joining a satanic cult, and then has satanic powers, but is like, I'm going to use them to fight Satan. This is not that. This is the same character design, and she gets her powers from Satan and everything, but then she's like, cool, I'm down with Satan. And so is evil. But this one has the counterpoint of a different character named Pandora, who's like the good version. So she's like, she has heavenly powers and she's fighting Helena. I don't substantively, or like substance-wise, I think that this is, I'm sure everyone will be so shocked. The Boundless one is less interesting from a storytelling point of view, because they put all of their eggs in the basket of, it's just like sexy demon girl stuff. But the actual, so the storytelling in the non-sexy version is better, but it's more boring too.
What kind of evil does she do?
She like tries to. Well, it's also complicated because she helped Satan take over the world, and so in this book, Satan is in charge of the world now, and you've been reading that?
No.
And so she's like his enforcer, but so she. Weirdly, Satan has like, just like in Christian mythology, Satan does have some redeeming qualities, which is that he like, everyone is supposed to be equal and stuff. So like, and everyone's supposed to have free will, and so she
is this
protects
Aerosmith bassist Satan?
No, he's a vampire.
Oh. And
so she goes around killing vampires and werewolves if they use mind control powers on people, because that's in violation of Satan's law, which is that everyone has to have free will. So, and she has other evil stuff though too, and the heavenly powers are still like they're guerrilla fighters. They're still trying to, win back the earth, and that's where Pandora comes in.
Is Pandora an angel?
She has heavenly powers. I don't know. She's not an angel per se. She doesn't have wings or anything, but she's like, the white hat version of Helena's black hat. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. The Pandora stuff makes it more interesting to me, but it's fun. Boundless books are very fun.
I find it really funny that they have. I think they do like nude variant covers.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, that's one thing. If you look through like, there's stuff. They have like a million variants. Sometimes it'll be like, it's like almost like different states of dress.
Right. So what I'm looking at is a Helena cover where it starts off and she's in like kind of a super outfit, and then she's in a mini skirt, and then she's in kind of like S&M underwear.
Yeah. So the same issue. And their books, unfortunately, aren't cheap. Probably because they know they have like this corner of the market covered. Like not many people are making sexy comics. So the books they're not, it's not astronomical. I think it's like usually $6 or $7 a comic, but it's more than everything else.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the author of the other Ember, the Christian Zanzier, it's a very high quality, like he's at least putting a ton of work. I remember when he was doing stuff for NBM, he would do like magazine racks, and he would Photoshop kind of like altered magazine covers where he would take real magazines and real like Camel cigarettes and things and change the logos so they're slightly different from scan imagery.
That's cool.
And so I feel like the amount of work he puts into it's worth it, but I feel like this thing is much more like this should be read on a toilet. Like this is like a junk comic that's really fun but stupid.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. And so maybe.
So weirdly, that for me is still like so much better than so many of the things that are being put out right now. That like this is what I want. I don't want. Well, I don't need to trash talk things. This is what I like. There you go.
It's nice to read something where someone's trying their hardest to do something in a direction.
Yeah.
I think the things that are oftentimes frustrating to us is when there's something that feels very just kind of like lukewarm, like who is this for? Why are you doing this? It's just kind of spinning the wheels.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Speaking of weird sex comics.
I mean, this one isn't even quite that, but so this is a British comic called Laser Racer and Press Button.
Yeah, and what does Press Button do?
He is a cyborg who basically just has a head and an arm that are still human, and he has a big red button that says press that he has a orgasm if you push.
And you said it comes up surprisingly regular, like make sense in the universe.
It didn't come up in this issue, but I know that at some point somebody just distracted him by doing that in some comic. I mostly read these when I was about 15, and so coming back to them, this one is like, the story of this one is they go to a small town and have to, these three old women hire them to take out a bunch of, to take out these kind of space motorcycle gang in there. And as the story progresses, the old women keep dying of old age until there's only one left. And I kept expecting there to be a twist where the old women were another criminal organization, but they're just old women. And it has a backup story in it, which is called Twilight World, and it's really fun. It has this character in it who is a guy who basically is wearing like a squid on his face, and the squid is like his. Like he's bonded with the squid, and it's like his lover. And there's a scene where they show what the squid looks like to him.
Weird.
And it's just this like redheaded woman, and it's just a little short story, but it's really cool, and it's like, you know, very much like the cat in My King City. The squid seems to do all these different things for him, like when he needs it to do it. And he's traveling around with this blonde babe lady in a future. So I don't know, I feel like maybe we're kind of keying into British comics again, because this and the 2000 AD stuff and AXA and everything you've been getting.
Oh yeah. Huh.
So these are really fun, and other Eclipse comics. I mean, I think Eclipse is one of my favorite publishers. Like it's
for sure
something I've been noticing a lot when we go to comic stores, that if there are certain publishers' logos on a book, like I do judge a lot by the quality of a logo. You know, like books like Dynamite books, like if you see like a beautiful cover on a book and it's bagged, I'm just like, their insides are not going to be as good. You know, in Eclipse, if I see that, or Antarctic Press, Antarctic and Eclipse are probably the ones that I'm like guaranteed to at least give a chance to.
Totally agreed. Yeah, those are two to look out for.
What else you got, Casey Jones?
Well, let me see how many others of this. Okay, so just quickly, I've been on the hunt for old Warhammer comics, or any Warhammer comic, old, new, whatever. They're very difficult to find, but I have found some, and your mileage may vary on them, because this one is bad. This one is pretty good.
Are they the same publisher?
They're not.
Oh.
So that makes perhaps a difference.
Boom and Titan.
Yeah. So the Boom one, bad. Titan one, good. And my reasoning basically is like the Boom one really just like lingers on stuff that does, like, it is not focusing on the things that Warhammer does well. It's just like these little nuanced things. It doesn't really make use of the incredibly rich lore that the world has, versus the Titan Comics one. First of all, it's British, and Warhammer, or Games Workshop, the company that makes Warhammer, is a British company, so I imagine that's probably...
Well, Titan's a publisher that I think is more impressive as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they do some pretty good stuff. A little underrated, in fact. But yeah, this one is much better at utilizing the lore, and really gets into some cool stuff about the far grimdark future. And yeah, so anyways, I'm looking for more of these. No more of these. Although I was so bummed that this one wasn't good, because it's from the old Warhammer Fantasy universe, which doesn't exist anymore. They got rid of Warhammer Fantasy. And so I was like, oh man, I used to love Warhammer Fantasy. Like, I have so many Warhammer Fantasy models and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is like, I can like relive my heyday. Like, but no, it was really bad. So that was a bummer. But there's that. And then I tried out Fatale. And it's by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. And I know that they are so talented. If anyone comes to me and they're like, I like crime things, what comics should I read? Boom. 10 times out of 10, I will direct them to a Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips team-up book, of which there are many. So if that is stuff that you like, holy cow, you should definitely read basically their whole catalog, because it's...
The Fade Out was my favorite of theirs.
The Fade Out. There you go. I have spent too much time in the criminal justice world and like around crime stuff that I just am not interested in that stuff. So it's not for me, but gosh darn it, do I respect them. And this one I thought maybe would be more up my alley because it was billed to me as going into like cult stuff, which is something I'm really interested in, like studying the psychology of cults and cultists and stuff like this. But it was I don't know, it just didn't really come through in this issue. It just really felt like a crime noir thing, which again, lots of respect for, but just not my jam. But anyways, give that a try. I know lots of people really love this series, and it's great. I can totally see how people would love it. It's just not for me. That's all.
That is something really interesting about how me and you kind of process fiction differently. Is there's a lot of things that where the reality, like imagine that a lot of what Brubaker and Phillips are going for that is more genre tropes than real crime stuff. And because you're aware of the reality, it kind of gets in the way. And I feel like sometimes you need this kind of internal logic when you know the facts of a situation and you're like, that's not how it would work out.
No, it's not even that for me. I just am, when I hear crime things, I am just incredibly disinterested because I have a lot of trauma around police and criminals and crime things and the criminal justice system and everything. So
yeah, that's totally fair.
No, thank you.
Actually, I just got a Brubaker and Eric Shanower book. I'm really excited to read because it's their take on the DC Comics Prez character, the teenage president. Mm-hmm. And I should say I'm excited to read it because I think the Prez character is stupid, and I think that I want to see what a good writer does with an idea that I think is dumb. Mm-hmm. And I think Eric Shanower is a great artist too. And I read another thing they did that was like a murder mystery set in Guantanamo.
Oh yeah, because they grew up there.
Oh yeah, Eric Shanower did.
Yeah. Oh, I thought both.
No, just one.
Oh, okay.
Brubaker actually grew up in Seattle and was kind of around when I was kind of coming up in comics.
That sounds familiar now that you say that. That's cool. But actually continuing on that same ilk of crime-related things, and this is just an example of, to me, like, why the more realistic a crime thing is, the less I am interested in it. There is occasional things that will, like, persevere through that and keep my attention, one of which is True Detectives, the first season. The other ones might be good too, I don't know. I liked the first season and I didn't like the second season, so and it's like pretty true to life except for some fantastical things that happen, and that's really good. And then another thing that's crime related that I do like, but I like it because it's not like our world, is the Judge Dredd type comics, and particularly Judge Anderson, the badass babe cop from the Psi division. Picked this up and really enjoyed it. I picked up a couple other 2000 AD books. It's not like my favorite stuff ever, but I go through periods where I'm like, yeah, I need some more of that. And I think it's interesting and cool, and it has that same British grimdark type setting of Warhammer, where things are pretty bleak in the future, and it's them coping with that. And I think one of the reasons why I connect with that is because I frequently feel that things are pretty bleak in the present, and seeing characters deal with a world like that in a really, like, basically acting as severe as the world is, that is very cathartic for me. And so I get a sort of like an emotional, psychological benefit out of that. Now, if this was just like a regular, real life, normal cop drama in comic book form, I would just have no interest, none at all. But because it's like this fantastical sci-fi, essentially, like, in Warhammer they call them the Arbiters, but they're essentially judges. It's basically, this is like Warhammer adjacent to me, so I like it. Ta-da!
Did you like the Dredd movie?
I thought, I've seen both of them, and I thought they were both okay. I actually, I'm like always so uneven about how much I like 2000 AD stuff. Like, I have gone back and watched both those movies to be like, how did I really feel? So like collectively, I think I've seen them each at least 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
So I must not hate them.
Yeah, because I remember really because I think I told you my friend Chris, who was a big 2000 AD fan, watched Dredd with me the one time I watched it, and so he pointed out all the Easter eggs and all the fun stuff in it that I was unaware of.
That would be super fun for me because I like 2000 AD stuff, but I don't know it to that degree. So that would be cool to see it with someone who could point this stuff out. I remember liking the one of the 2. I liked the one that had Judge Anderson in it. So that was the Carl
that was
Urban
the new one, Dredd.
I think.
What's that?
That's the Carl Urban one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, that was cool. Do you want to talk about?
Oh, sure. 'Cause we were talking about Titan before, and this is a Static Press comic. I think it's
some of their imprints, right?
Yeah, probably a French translation. This is by Vincent Perrault, who I have another book from my friend Farrell gave me, which is just this very beautiful thing about like a black and white book about 2 girls kind of going across Paris in a car on a road trip, and every this big
across France or Paris?
Paris.
Oh.
Or France. Might be France. I don't know. It just says the Eiffel Tower in it. It's all silent.
I just asked because a road trip through Paris seems like very short.
They go to the country too.
Okay.
But Paris is the city they go to. And it has all the pages are giant full page illustrations with a tiny little panel next to it. So it's an interesting storyteller trick. And I didn't even recognize the artist's work from that because this is like a post-apocalyptic science fiction dinosaur book where it starts out in a guy who's a dinosaur herder, has his flock dies because of an electrical problem from a from a train passing by. Then he goes to get revenge in the city, and then gets kind of mixed up in a bunch of politics in the city, and it's incredibly beautiful, full color, really really detailed cityscapes, and really fun story so far. It has really cool action scenes. I'm only about a third of the way through it, but I'm really impressed by it so far. And it was one of those books that a lot of French comics I'm less kind of engaged with these days when they come out in the American market. A lot of them just feel very it's like they kind of missed what the Metal Hurlant guys taught them, but this feels like it's kind of coming back to that in a cool way.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I haven't read it yet, but it looks beautiful. I suppose this is vaguely... I can link these two by... That one is set in a desert for the most part, as is this one, which is Zell, Sworddancer, by Steve Galachi of Albedo fame. And it's possible you were saying that maybe this is like a the only issue that ever got made.
I think that's right. Which
is a bummer if that's the case, because it's definitely not a complete story. But it's really, really pretty, and I wish that there were more. And if there are more, I hope to find them, because yeah, it was pretty. I think Steve Galachi is a really nice style. It's very like I don't know how to say it. Just like elegant? Oh, not elegant. I don't know. Well, nice.
In it, he mentions at one point, he's like, if comics don't work out for me, I'm going to go back to having to draw diagrams of engines. And it really feels like someone who like worked at Boeing or something and was doing... I probably talked a bit about Steve Galachi before. I met him a couple times when I was a kid because he was out of Seattle where I grew up. And I have some signed Albedo comics, and I used to wear an Albedo t-shirt when I was a kid. That was really fun because it's the first time I've seen him draw anything without animal characters. And in that one, kind of just like the God Network, it's a bunch of characters riding dinosaurs like they're horses.
Yeah. Which is cool.
The frustrating thing about that is it's kind of a confusing beginning to it in a lot of ways. It has a thing that looks like a dream sequence or someone going to heaven or something.
Yeah.
And then about midway through the book, the actual story starts, and the story that it starts is very clear, and it's just about this young woman who's who kind of wants to be a dancer, but her options are limited to her, and then the guy that has a...
She's supposed to be a sword user, which they call dancers in this book. That's why it's Sword Dancer.
Right.
The full title.
And then she has a guy that likes her, and she gets kidnapped by these guys, and the guy joins the caravan to try to save her, and then that kind of is to be continued.
Yeah.
So it's a little frustrating in that sense, but it's really cool. The kind of what could have happened of this other Steve Gallacci series is really cool.
Yeah, and for me, not having read as much Steve Gallacci stuff, I'm like just excited to find even another comic of his. So it's like, oh, that's cool. So that's fun.
Because if I know he did Albedo, Zell the Sworddancer, and then he co-did a thing in Eclipse Comics called Fusion.
Nice. So then we also got another foreign translated comic. This one's called Angela de la Muerte from Red 5 Comics, which I normally know for Atomic Robo, which is just like a very cute kind of like YA comic that I used to get. But yeah, the art in this is really good.
It's really beautiful.
It's definitely not targeted for kids, because if the De la Muerte didn't give it away, it's it's got violence and stuff and sexy things, or just like...
I mean, she's kind of wandering around in a bikini. The science fiction element that I like this comic a lot. It's a thing where this woman is on the moon with a monkey, and the monkey is something where...
It's an avatar for somebody who's actually on Earth.
Yeah, so it's them like projecting their mind. And it has a funny name. It's like a soul something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even think it's giving away much. They have their ship destroyed by a missile that comes out of nowhere. And then their base back on Earth is just like, there's a secret base hidden in this crater, so they have to go find the secret base.
Because they're about to run out of oxygen.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun premise. Because something that I was really impressed by a lot of manga is it has a way to kind of drive the story where you have this feeling of like, I can't wait to get to the next page. What's happening? And I feel like that's oftentimes very lacking in Western comics.
Definitely.
That feeling of necessity, and this one really created that, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I feel like we both kind of burned through it pretty fast, maybe because of that. It's also a little bit sparse, which is nice. I love that. I like sparse a lot more than jam-packed. But
yeah, it's funny how a wall of text can just make things boring, and it has things like this page is just her looking at a porthole of just black space.
Looking out into the void. But yeah, that was a good one. Then we got... so I like Alice in Wonderland things. So Brandon found this series of comic books that has in it a Alice in Wonderland story, but it's actually not in this specific issue. We thought that the whole series was maybe an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. It's not. It's like in, I think, 2 issues, but that's okay, because it's a very fun series anyways, and it's like so it's like a kind of a weird anthology, and I think, this actually does have some Alice stuff, and it's done in this, like, I don't know, very stylized kind of way.
Oh, it's by Leela Dowling, who I was mentioning, that Fusion comic with Steve Gallacci earlier. Leela Dowling actually co-drew and wrote the Fusion, and the other woman in here, Donna Barr, who does this kind of Old English Centaurs story. It's really fun, or series of stories. She, in the back of the Zell Sworddancer comic, she actually has a couple of the Centaur characters in there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it all feels very interconnected, cool indie 80s comics.
Yeah. And this one is interesting. Yeah, so this is the Dreamery. By the way, I guess I didn't say the name of the anthology, but the anthology is the Dreamery, which is again by Eclipse Comics. Zell the Sworddancer, the one by Steve Gallacci, that one is Thoughts and Images.
That was his self-publishing company.
Okay, there you go. So, but yeah, all definitely, along the same lines, the same community, same time and whatnot. And yeah, it's a fun Another fun, weird find.
I should mention that, so Donna Barr, the woman that did the Centaur comic in here, she's the first person to ever publish me.
Mm-hmm.
She did a book called Ersatz Peach, which she has a character that she's probably still doing a thing with, which is basically, there's the Desert Fox, who's like the World War II German officer who was famous. Rommel. Who was famous for just being
the African Corps in Northern Africa during World War II.
Yes, he's famous for being an intense fighter during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And the Desert Peach is about his gay brother.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just trying to avoid the war and have tea parties and things. If I'm remembering it right, it's very fun and ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one I'll probably track down and read at some point.
Yeah, I've been on the look for it for sure.
I imagine the story I did for it is intensely embarrassing now, because the idea of handing to I don't know what I was, 16 then, to be like, do a gay Nazi story. It's just like, I'm sure I handled that with the worst, the least delicate gloves imaginable.
Yikes. Well then, just one last comic to talk about was The Tale of One Bad Rat, which we acquired. We've been on look for this stuff for a while. I guess we were told out of print, but we got lucky and found these 2 issues, and then subsequently we found the trade, which actually has about I think it's we thought 4 or 5 more issues beyond these 2.
I feel like these are half of it.
It didn't look like quite half to me, but anyways, doesn't matter. I've read these 2 so far. I think we both read these 2 so far. Haven't read the other ones that are in the trade, but it's Brian Talbot is the creator, writer and artist, and you wanted to show it to me because I really like Brian Talbot's work with Grant Morrison on Doom Patrol, I think it was.
Yeah, he also did some Sandman, and you're reading Fables, so it's all mixed up in my head in those. Mm. But I remember you liking his work a lot in those, and saying he was your favorite artist that did it, and I was like, oh, he did this series, and so we tried to track it down, and it's interesting because these first 2 issues end in a really kind of satisfying conclusion where you just thought it was done, mm-hmm. and then we were just going through used comics and we found the trade, and you're like, oh, there's so much more of the story, which is such a cool feeling. This is interesting because it's another British comic, but it does have this very French feeling. I think it might be watercolor.
Oh, yeah, I think it is watercolored. Yeah.
Yeah, and I showed you some of his more recent stuff. He did kind of an anthropomorphic badger comic, like a badger detective comic, and it's computer colored, and it was kind of a loss because it's the hand done color in it is so beautiful.
Totally. Very much agreed. But yeah, basically it's about this young girl who grows up in a rough home and she runs away and is homeless and has her main friend is a little rat. That's the tale of one bad rat. And she meets some other homeless youths and she squats with them and it's just dealing with that life.
And there's a cool Beatrix Potter tie-in too. She is obsessed with Beatrix Potter, and I didn't realize before there's a Beatrix Potter story called A Tale of Two Bad Mice.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or Two Good Mice, maybe? Something like that. Oh. So this is kind of an allusion to that, and she's always redrawing Beatrix Potter stuff, and there's a bunch of like Beatrix Potter's house. Yeah. She runs into it at one point, and she says something about she says almost like a quote about how it's like a place that she Beatrix Potter lived but didn't enjoy living there.
Mm. Yeah.
Which is very much how the main character in this feels. Something really cool too about the trade that I realized is, after I'd read 2 issues, I kind of flipped to the trade to see how much more of it there was. And in the back there's the character of her, and then there's her kind of best friend character, who's another homeless kid who helps her out a lot. And there's photos of the people he used for reference in it, and it's so bizarre once you get to know fictional characters and to see a photo of a real person and be like, oh, that's them. Weird.
Yeah. And it's not like he took much liberties with those photos. That is almost exactly what they look like, and he's a really good artist, so it looks real, and it's like, whoa, it's crazy.
Yeah. It is one of those comics that's kind of a shame that isn't more. We could probably make lists and lists of comics that are the kind of staples that people miss. They're like these great comics that are.
and through no fault of their own, it's literally just these things are difficult to find, which is so frustrating. But yeah, there's so many. So I think if I ever had a tip for anybody who was like interested in getting into comics, would be like, just go looking through quarter bins, because some of the best stuff is there for sure, and it's not on the rest of the shelves.
Yeah, I always feel like I always imagine if I went to, went online or went into certain comic stores and were like, I'm excited about comics, what will you give me to get into them? I feel like, you get handed some books and I'd be like, well, I wouldn't come back. So it's almost like if you fall in love with the medium then and are interested in digging, I think me and you both have the kind of like bin diving bug in our blood, and so we really enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's so much, and just the idea that I've found so many amazing books, and you found so many amazing books that that are like more exciting than I thought the medium could be, kind of keeps me digging.
Yeah, we like will frequently find these weird books that are like, whoa, I didn't know that anybody had done something like this. Like, what? That's crazy. So, anyways, yeah, we've been very busy finding lots of comics, reading lots of comics.
We're in a different house than we were last time.
We're in a different house now, yes. Still in Vegas, but different house. And we've bought a lot more comics that we haven't read yet. So, we'll be back soon to talk about more of this.
We have things to discuss.
But regardless, thanks for watching. If you got something out of this video, please click that like and subscribe button. And until next time.
I'm a hand, bro.